Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us.
Lisa Shelby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I met Lisa because we have a lot of similar friends. And when I launched my other podcast, everyone said, you've got to talk to her. Angie West was one of them.
Yes, Angie and I were roommates for a while.
Oh, okay. And what I loved about Lisa's story is that she touches on, even though she doesn't have the similar childhood abuse that we talk about, she definitely has childhood abuse and trauma, is that where it took her and the work she's doing now to especially help women with sex addiction or sexual integrity. I love that you discern between that, and we'll bring that up later too. So why don't you start with just telling us your story, and then we'll move into what you're doing now. How does that sound?
Sure, that sounds great. So my story is that I was raised by a single dad for the first 3 years of my life. My parents divorced as a baby. And when I was 3, he decided to marry someone that he didn't know real well, just so that I would have a mom. And what he didn't realize is that she had a major anger issue and was very, very abusive over the years. Initially, it was kept hidden from him. I guess the word would probably be groomed me or manipulated. When I was about 6 or 7, she would give me newspaper articles to read of horrific child abuse cases and would tell me, see, you don't have it so bad now, do you? And these articles at that age traumatized me so much. I mean, I remember not sleeping for a couple of nights because most of them ended in death, honestly. So reading about that as such a young child, that kept me quiet. She used, different ways. As time went on, maybe about 7 years later, my dad committed suicide. And she kept me in the house with my younger brother and older stepsister and did not let my biological mom know that my dad was dead. The abuse became worse. I feel that I was kept because I had a Social Security check attached to my name. And the abuse became worse. There were doctor's appointments. I played basketball in junior high and high school. There were doctor's appointments for physicals and what have you that were canceled because the bruises hadn't healed up yet. There were days I couldn't brush my hair because my head had been slammed up against the wall so much. So I was planning my own suicide. Just writing a suicide note and planning that gave me relief. It felt like it was an escape. I didn't know how to get out of it because she had me convinced that I deserved it, So fast forward, I moved out in the middle of my senior year, found my biological mom, met her, and moved to St. Louis. And that's where basically I started over. I married and had 3 fabulous daughters, was married for 22 years. Unfortunately, I did not get the counseling and the healing that I needed to between leaving my home life, my family of origin, and choosing a mate. Unfortunately, I chose someone very similar to my stepmother. Very controlling, gaslighting. There was domestic abuse, except I was never hit. There were no bruises. There was every other sort. So after 22 years, that marriage dissolved. And so I have been single now for 10 years. After the marriage dissolved, initially, I had no thoughts that any man would be interested in me. So the thought of dating again, remarrying, any of that was not even in my scope. Eventually, I joined online dating. That's a whole other podcast. And because I had been married for so long, I was looking for that love. I was looking to be affirmed by somebody. I had grown up, my dad disappeared on me. My stepmother, mother, the relationships were difficult. Ex-husband, always looking for affirmation and that and not received it. So I went into dating thinking that I was going to finally find that magic, that magic of being okay in someone else's eyes, finding my self-worth in somebody else's eyes. And what I found in online dating was, or at least the ones that I experienced, was just a matter of hookup after hookup after hookup was what it boiled down to. So it was, for me, it was rejection, 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 because they didn't want a relationship with me. They just wanted to hook up. I took it as rejection. All my life, I've struggled with my weight and my self-worth around that. My worth was determined by the number and the tag of my jeans. All growing up, I was told many things about my weight and how I didn't measure up from home. So I took all of this rejection as it was because of my body. It was because of me not measuring up. So in my mind, I took that and I just removed the emotional aspect. I removed the desire for a relationship and I saw, okay, for an hour, I can pretend that I'm wanted. I can pretend that somebody desires me, that I'm cherished by somebody. And if whoever this person is, if he finds me attractive enough to want to sleep with me, then all of those things I was told growing up aren't true. And for a while, that was good enough. That's all I could find. And then eventually that wasn't enough anymore. What I have found with myself and with a lot of women that I've talked with is, a lot of men look at pornography, and there's a lot of women addicted to pornography as well. Women, I think, can get hooked in by erotica, the books, whether it's Harlequin romances or 50 Shades of Grey and everything else in between. And I think that is overlooked a lot and not taken into account of what can get the mind going. I think men are very visual. Women, it's more in the mind. And that's what hooked me into taking it from one night stands to something even more, where I willingly gave up my control over situations. I put myself in dangerous situations. It had become a sexual addiction for me. I was looking for that next high. I was looking for that next thing that was giving me that surge of adrenaline. Finally, I was sitting in church one morning and I realized this is not me. This was not me at all. I had looked at myself in the mirror and went, who even is this? I was raised in church. I raised my daughters in church. I homeschooled my girls for 15 years. This is not what a homeschool mom does. And God just really spoke to my heart and said, I want you at that Celebrate Recovery meeting that they're talking about right now. And so I began attending Celebrate Recovery, not really understanding or knowing the background behind it. In my mind, I thought of recovery as drugs and alcohol. But I saw on the invitation to Celebrate Recovery that it was for more than that. So I went, not really sure what to expect. The first time I sat in that group and we were going around, we were introducing ourselves and just kind of naming what our struggles were. And I had never said out loud, barely even to myself, that I was a sex addict. I remember talking to God on the drive over there and saying, okay, so this is how we're going to work this. I'm going to show up to what you called me to do, but I am not going to say that out loud. That's between you and I. That doesn't need to be talked about, but I'll work on this, but nobody needs to know that. yeah, that didn't work so well. 15 minutes into the, the group setting, and we're going around. And here's the fabulous thing. Out of the 10 of us that were sitting there were probably 7 or 8 that admitted to a sexual addiction of some sort. And I'm looking at everybody else's faces when the others are confessing this, and I'm not seeing looks of disgust. I'm not seeing, people being repulsed at this. And so when it finally came to me, and it was one of those moments where my heart was beating so hard, and I said for the first time, my name is Lisa and I'm a sex addict. And I will tell you, I felt like 15 pounds just dropped off my shoulders, because for me to admit it out loud for the first time, that was half the battle. The secret that I felt that I needed to keep, that secret life, and particularly because I lived a life that was very involved in the church, and it was hard to keep those two very separate.
Mm-hmm.
When I finally confessed, that was such a relief, such a joy, and I never realized just the hold that the enemy had on me of keeping quiet about that, because now I was stepping forward. Now I'm willing to walk that out. So for the last 7 years, I have been involved in Celebrate Recovery, and I no longer struggle with sexual addiction. And as I go around Snohomish County, Skagit County, I've shared my testimony with hundreds of people in many, many different Celebrate Recoveries. And each time I share it, there's always somebody in the audience that comes up afterwards and says, thank you for sharing that, because I have struggled with that too, but I've never been brave enough to say it out loud. I'm here because I'm an alcoholic, but I have this on the side. I'm majoring in drug addiction, but I'm minoring in sex addiction. It's basically what it comes down to. And that has been just, I have to say, it's so interesting how God works. As I was given more and more responsibility in the Celebrate Recovery program, that has propelled me into more and more leadership, and finally realizing that I wanted to get into ministry. And last December, I became a licensed pastor in the Assemblies of God Church. And 2 months ago, I graduated from Northwest University with my bachelor's in pastoral ministry.
Oh, well done.
Thank you. Thank you. So I tell people, if I can become a pastor and cauliflower can become pizza, you can do anything.
I
love that. And Elisa's going on to get her master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm getting I'm taking a 6-month break, and I'm going to work on start my master's degree in January.
Wow.
And so there's a couple things that I really want to touch base with. One is, you had talked about the difference between sexual addiction versus calling it sexual integrity. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, because I feel like sexual addiction, not everybody feels like they're an addict. Not everybody wants to admit they're an addict. Not everybody understands what that even looks like. But sexual integrity covers a gamut. That's, what are you watching? Is it porn? Is it soft porn? The books that, I don't know how this was allowed, but I was attending a Christian school in the 5th grade and reading Harlequin romances. Yeah. So I would have to say that probably played a very big part in just my developmental mind getting to that. So there's the books, there's what you see, whether it's pornographic in nature, and there's love and relationship addiction, which is really tied into that. And that can compromise your sexual integrity. When we don't know who we are in Christ, who we are to the one who created us first, we go out looking everywhere else for that. And that's something that I feel like sexual integrity is necessary, whether it's in the church, whether it's outside the church. we don't know what that really looks like anymore because that's not modeled by anyone. And I will stand here and tell you the church has done a very poor job of teaching that. It's, let's slap a purity ring on you and attend a conference where you signed a paper that you won't have sex before you're married. And then when you do, because the vast majority does, then it's shame.
Mm-hmm.
So my heart is discipleship. Discipleship is just doing life with people, going along. It's not let's come to my 4-week Bible study and we're going to talk about how bad sex is before marriage. Discipleship is you do life together. And so what my desire is, what my heart is writing a book, writing a discipleship program to help women with sexual integrity, whether it looks like pornography, whether it looks like book reading, whether it looks like constant signing up on 4 different dating sites so that you can always be having some man texting you and giving you that affirmation, even if it's over a text. And then that's when it's drawn into sending, pictures, and there's a whole gamut of sexual integrity out there. And it's my heart to let's deal with that. Let's work on coming together and understanding what it's supposed to look like without the shame. Okay, this is what's happened. This is what, where you've been. Let's put that behind us because that's scriptural. Let's put that behind us and learn from it. And let's walk forward into the reason why you were created, into the reason why your sexuality is created, and learn to be okay with that.
We've discovered there's many programs for men. We have several coaches that have come through our podcast, but there is not necessarily that for women. I don't think that's something that I see or know about. And the fact that you're willing to speak the words and say, hey, no shame, let's talk, is just amazing to me.
You're right. There isn't anything out there for women specifically. The church has just started to recognize the 77% of Christian men that are addicted to pornography. That's what the latest statistics are. What they're not talking about is that there are only 12% of women, and we're talking secular and Christian, there's only 12% of women who have not viewed pornography. That's huge. And that's just pornography. That's not the teenage girls that are sleeping around with their boyfriends because they're not getting attention from their dad or because they need that feel of validation. And it's not just teenage girls, but it's college age girls and it's 50-plus-year-old women who don't feel attractive or loved or whatever. The reasons why women turn to sex or pornography or these books, the reasons are very different than the reasons why men do. And that needs to be addressed and that needs to be talked about. And I tried to read the books written for men and they didn't really apply because my reasons, like what I talked about earlier, men are very visual. So the pornography thing is a very stimulating thing. I'm not saying women aren't visual, but we're much more in our head. Reading the book, we can visualize that, and that can just go south really quick.
Yeah.
It seems that also women, when you say they're in your heads, it's also an emotional thing. It's an emotional connection. It's a way of expressing emotion and also receiving something from someone else that makes you feel a certain way. For men, that's not necessarily it. Men are looking for that stimulation, but women, it seems, not talking from experience because I'm not a woman, but there seems to be more of an emotional connection that they're seeking in that. And
You're exactly right.
I think that's why romance novels and those kinds of things, like the whole Twilight romance, and then, all these other offshoots of just this kind of soft erotica, but it's that connection. You're feeling this feelings about
Absolutely.
it.
Yes. You hit the nail on the head, because when I said how I was able to just take the emotion. I took the emotion out. Well, I didn't really take the emotion out. I was satisfied with, for an hour, I pretended this person was interested in me. I pretended that they cherished me, loved me, whatever. It definitely, for women, it is based on emotion and that desire to be desired.
Yeah.
Well, there was a survey and it talked about women when, we are sort of programmed for our family and our husbands. So for women later in life, if their husband passes away or they become divorced, their kids are gone, they don't know where to find their value because we've never been taught that our value is us. And, coming from trauma, which we talk about a lot, that just skews everything. And I love that you mentioned that, you didn't get the help before you got married. And what do? I remember when I got divorced from my kid's dad, I reached out to a friend who had become a pastor's wife and said, "Hey, I'm getting divorced." This was over 20 years ago. And so, in my mind, it was taboo. She said, "Well, that's because you didn't pray hard enough before you married him." Mm-hmm. And he was parading in front, going to church as a youth pastor before he decided to come out of the closet. So, we attract what we know. Because how would we not? So is that when you started to find the healing and celebrate recovery and get the counseling to get that resolved and work through all those issues?
Yes, very much. I had to go back. I went back and I started to work through the issues in my childhood because the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, mental abuse was huge and really took a toll. I addressed that first. And quite honestly, I remember my roommate and I sitting around just even probably maybe about 4 years ago. And I was sharing about my marriage and some of the things that happened in my marriage. And she looked at me and she goes, I have known you for 4 or 5 years. And I've heard your testimony several times. Why is none of this in your testimony? And I realized I hadn't dealt with it yet. I hadn't dealt with the abusive aspect of my marriage because I think as women, we are told so much that if you don't have bruises to show, the abuse didn't happen. That's just disagreement, to call it whatever you want. But that's not true. And that's something that I feel very, very strong. Several years ago, I went through the volunteer program with the Snohomish County Domestic Violence Shelter. And I've been trained on answering the hotline. I've, worked with here and there some different things. And I will say that was actually very healing as well, because part of it was, in one part of my mind, I was being healed as the victim in domestic violence as a child. Then another part of me was being healed with being the wife and, recognizing how some of that affected my kids as well. So many people think that putting their past aside, putting what happened to them as a child aside, burying it is the best thing to do. And I've seen over and over and over, it manifests somehow, whether it's in a psychological, whether it's a physical, it manifests. It's not going away. And the best thing is to bring it out and deal with it and work through it. And quite honestly, it's a process. Mm. I'm still dealing with and dealing through some of those things. I still have to wonder if I get asked out on a date and I don't get a call back, I struggle big time with my worth. Is it my weight? Did I do this? To me, it was always something that I did or didn't do, not having any idea that actually I became friends with a few of those men that I went out on a date with and found out that they felt intimidated. Like, well, you could have mentioned that. I thought it was my fault all along.
Yeah, that's so good, because when we hold our story, it does manifest. We just spoke with somebody who shared her story of being trafficked for so many years. And somebody who was 71 or 73 came up to the pastor afterwards and said, that happened to me when I was a little girl. And what she did is she stuffed it all down, became a perfectionist and a professional. But even though her life looked a lot different than the storyteller, it was the same hurt. And she was so happy to hear that story and be able to say that happened to me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I bet. I bet. Wow.
And also by sharing our stories, we're giving people space to realize they're not alone, and they can talk about their story finally. And
exactly.
I think when we bottle it up, we don't recognize the ways that we're coping with it. And addiction is a crazy thing. It's not just drugs and alcohol or tobacco. Right. There's so many things. There's a book called Dopamine Nation. It's really good. It talks about how we get addicted, what kind of causes that in our brain chemistry, what the actions are in our brain that cause us to be more and more and more and more addicted. But the main point is we start it because we're coping. We're trying to find a way of coping. And
yes.
that takes us down this trail. And then when we get the reward from whatever we use, then we want more and more of it because it takes away that pain. It takes us away from those feelings that we're having.
Yes, exactly. And I know that was what I felt when I realized that no longer were one night stands enough. I wasn't getting that dopamine fix anymore. I had to look for more. And where that can lead is a very scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing with dopamine. When you get your fix, then our body balances, and then we need more to get that fix, and then it balances again, and then we need more. And so it becomes a cycle of just searching and searching for more and more and more because we're lacking that dopamine in our body.
Yeah.
So. And, along with that, one of the things we talked about too is how it's a process. Mm-hmm. And so many times we've heard people say, I called out to Jesus, I called out to God. And there's, I think, kind of a feeling of the general public wants that instant healing. Okay. They ask for help, they're good. Like that, then it's a process. And as a recovery coach, that's how I work with families is they think, okay, mom, dad is off drugs. They can be around the kids now, or I'm never going to let him around the kids. It's finding that balance and respecting the process and that it actually is different for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And like I shared, I had to process through my childhood trauma, and then I had to process through my marital dysfunction, my domestic abuse. And I've had to process through what does it look like to be a single pastor? That's just that's a whole nother thing to really process through and decide, what does that look like for me? What am I being called to do? I'm being called to talk about sex.
As a single woman.
As a single woman. I have this backstory, but yet I'm a pastor. So it really kind of puts me into an interesting position that some people have said, you have to be careful about what you say. And yes, absolutely. But I have to say, I think that our being so focused on being careful about what we say has led us to not addressing the things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I think that's
Amen.
Very important, especially in churches. And a lot of our churches, they're so careful about talking about our flaws because we're trying to appear like, because we're saved, we're going to church, that our flaws have been erased somehow.
Yeah. I've been invited tomorrow evening. I have been invited to be on a panel with 4 other people to talk to young adults. So 18 to 25, I think. And they get to text in all of their questions about sex. So
that should be entertaining. Yeah, very entertaining.
It's funny because it's that whole thing of desire, and that we were created for this. And then it just gets so, like we were created for love and family, and it gets so distorted. And like with drugs, we talk about abstinence, but that's not necessarily what you want in relationship. You still want to desire a relationship,
right?
Or, so that can be really confusing. And I love it that you are asking the questions. What does it mean to be a woman, single pastor? And how am I going to show up? And am I going to be brave enough? I think of those women that have been on TV, like, who is that older woman that talked about sex all the time? And Esther.
Oh, Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth, yes.
Esther Perel, that they're willing and they're not ashamed of talking about it, which then gives the freedom to explore. And I love that you said being careful is what has got us in trouble. And isn't that what we, even as a parent, I always tell people when they say to their kids all the time, be careful. It's like, stop it. If they're going to walk on a log and fall off, they're going to learn and they're not going to do it again unless they're going to fall off a cliff onto a train track where a train's coming. Like, we're always cautioning, and maybe that is something that we want to let go of. And then people will get their experience and understand what it is they really want and need.
Yeah, I agree very much so. And I'm concerned about, I don't even know how to address this yet, but this is something that I'm looking inside my own self and talking with other women and reading about. How do we, as women, how do we express our sexuality and our sensuality? And how do we embrace that and keep that, but do it in the right way? There's not been a guide for that. And so many women that I've talked to, they're being brought up, their parents said, or the church said, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. And those who followed through with that, many of them were disappointed when they got married. And this is not me saying that's going to happen to you, so go have sex before you get married. That's not me saying that at all. I don't feel that there has been much mental preparation and just knowing what to expect. So many women I see, though, that did what they call, they caved in and they gave their boyfriend or fiance, what they wanted. And even now, decades later, they struggle with the guilt of doing that. And it has adversely affected their sexual relationship with their husband. So they carry this shame with them, and they've carried it for so long that they don't know how to let go of it. They don't know how to put it down and be able to walk forward into what the beautiful thing that they could have that's available with their husband. They don't know how to do that because that shame is such a huge, huge weight on us. It's like wearing a backpack. And, I think of my stepmom put shame on me. That was like a brick in my backpack. Other people that have come along in my life have I've put my own shame in my own backpack. And I felt like I've been carrying this backpack of bricks, this shame around for years. And it wasn't until I was willing to, in a safe space, that's important, in a safe space, be able to speak about my truth, speak about what has happened, and to really be able to look back. What I chose to do was not because I was a slut, right? There are reasons that my childhood trauma played a big part. And please understand what I'm saying. I'm not blaming my choices in my late 40s of the men that I slept with. I'm not blaming that. I'm not blaming that onto my stepmom. I made those choices. However, what I went through, and because I did not heal from childhood trauma, is what led me to making those choices. And that is my responsibility, and that's another pendulum swing that I see a lot of people, is they blame everything on their parents or ex-husband, ex-wife, whatever. That may be where it started, but there comes a point where you have to own the responsibility of healing. That's on you.
We talk about in recovery that it's not linear. It's not A to Z. And as you're telling this story, I'm almost rocking with you because it's like a little too much of this, and then you zigzag. And it's like the thing is, it is a zigzag. It's not a straight line. And think about the messages Christian girls are told: you're dangerous. What are you wearing? Don't be dangerous. Don't do things that will cause problems for men. So we're told not to. Then you think about whenever the police come out because there's a serial killer or something, they tell women, don't walk alone. Well, yeah, that's a safety thing, but why are women always being blamed and pointed at to not be? And so then you find yourself as a 60-year-old woman who's going, oh, I've been told not to be my whole life. How am I supposed to be? And I think it is, like you're saying, it's so much deeper, and it is a path of unveiling, uncovering, discovering, and changing the language and the narrative. And I really, really wish Kevin's wife was on this call because she has a lot to say about that. And maybe we'll do another one with a panel with her on that, because I think this is, this is so important.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to hear her story.
Yeah. She also was in a relationship that was not physically abusive, but very emotionally and mentally abusive. He was very much narcissistic and just control freak. And it has affected her whole life since then. And it's still difficult at times.
I can understand that. Those are two things, control freak and narcissist, and the gaslighting. There are still things. And like I said, it's been 10 years and I moved 2,000 miles away. I feel safer. But there are still things. There's dreams. It's in the last 2 years. This has been the first. I've had 2 year span of time where I haven't had a nightmare where he's controlling something, and it's debilitating. It brings you right back to where you were before that feeling in the dream. But there's also things that happen to me on a day-to-day basis. There's people that I talk to that will trigger that control. I've even said, I don't know if I'll ever get married, because the thought of somebody telling me I can't do something, I don't know. I don't want to put God in a box by any means. I know that he can heal me from that, just as he's healed me from many other things. But I'm standing here right now telling you, I still struggle with that, because that control was over me and my kids so much that I don't know if I will be able to have a healthy relationship in that respect.
And churches don't know how to deal with that. I'll tell you, I have coached so many women coming out of domestic violence, and guess who the church will choose?
Oh, it's a man, pretty much every time. Yeah.
Yep. And so it is, when a woman decides to come out and say her truth, she will often not only lose her marriage, her church, and even sometimes the kids will be swayed for a while because they're really confused as well. And so, Lisa, I'm so grateful that you came on here, because you are willing to do the work. And there's a person she's an author, Alex L., and she says, self-healing is an act of community service. And when we don't get help, we affect our families because we get triggered, we get mad, we take it out on them. When we don't go to counseling, when we don't look at our past, we think what you said, we're hiding it. No, we're not. We're hurting everyone around us. And we think we have this big badge of courage when really our family is trying to get away from us because we're hurting them with all that we do. And even moms who are like, look in the mirror and go, you're so fat, to themselves. I'm so fat. What our kids are hearing that. Now our kids are doing it. We're passing it down. When we choose to do what you did, to get help, to speak our truth and let go of that shame, the world will be different. And I believe what you're doing and the message that you're creating and formulating right now, the questions that you're asking, are going to have a huge, huge impact.
I hope so, because that's the only thing that I know that I've been called into ministry. This wasn't something I chose. I mean, let's be real. I'm over 50. I'm a woman and I'm single. And this is not where you go to make the big bucks. So I know I was called into this, and I'm just trusting him on the whole financial aspect of it. But I know that everything that I've gone through in the past, if I can take what I've gone through and make something good come out of it, that's the most important thing. And I wanted so badly to not put my kids through a home life like what I was raised in. Now, in a lot of ways, theirs was very different and in a better way. But in a lot of ways, they have come out with a lot of the same, struggles, because the controlling thing was not just over me. It was over them as well. And it was not just, there were aspects that really influenced how I believe they see relationships with themselves. They're all in their 20s now. And I see how that father-daughter relationship, there can be a very positive influence and there can be a negative influence.
Yeah. Well, you're doing amazing work. And I'm, again, so grateful for you sharing your story, because when I first heard your story, immediately all these names came to my head that we have interviewed, that I've interviewed in different capacities, that have said it and been like, I've never told anybody. They're in church. They're so involved in church, but they do not have a safe place to go to say those words. And I remember being it was called Rooted. It's a program
sure.
a lot
I'm
of
familiar
churches
with that.
do. And
Yeah.
I got put in the one with one of the clean and sober houses. And so one of the girls was like, well, when I was a hoe, I did this and that. And, it touched my heart, because I thought, can you imagine if she would have been put in a group in a church and the church ladies would have heard that? We want to create that safe place where women can say what they need to say, and where we don't have to feel dangerous or ashamed or blamed for these things. And we're not saying we want to point our finger at men, but we want to empower women to be able to speak their truth, to be able to, and you had even mentioned that your self-esteem, when you went to college to take the test and they said you passed and you can come to college, you were so shocked. And here you've been homeschooling your kids for years, but that what they put on us is now the self-talk that we take over for them. And that you had mentioned, reversing that and turning that around too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I am definitely not the same person now than I was 10 years ago, for sure. And I still have a lot of work to go. I still struggle, the sexual integrity, the sexual addiction, the love and relationship addiction. I have been able to work through that so much. But I'm also single. What's that going to look like when or if I'm in a relationship? That's just a whole other thing that I will need to take what I've learned, take the tools that I've learned and apply it in my relationship. But I also still struggle with my weight. I struggle with turning, Kevin earlier talking about the whole dopamine thing. Food issues is the most socially acceptable addiction out there, unfortunately. And sometimes the churches really kind of, with all the potlucks but that is something that I'm still working through. That's something I'm still struggling through. And I find it interesting that both of my addictions, I've not struggled with alcohol or drugs because I don't like to lose control. I need to stay in control. And so both of my addictions, both of my struggles have to do with how I view my body. And they play a part together. And most of the women that I have talked to that struggle with any sort of a sexual addiction usually have a food addiction that's attached to it, which I find really interesting. And I've been wanting to really go look into that more and see where that connection is. Is it a biological thing? Is it a spiritual thing? What's going on? Why do those two go hand in hand so much?
I think it's interesting you were talking about struggling with control and you not wanting to give up control. So much of they're finding eating disorders are about controlling themselves. Women and men that have eating disorders, they're trying to maintain and gain control by having this eating issue, whether it's overeating, bulimia, or anorexia. It's a way of controlling their bodies. That no one else can control them. That's something they alone can control. And I think that comes from a feeling of helplessness sometimes, or, having being in a family that they have no control over what's happening in that family. And so they take control in another way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went through a outpatient program for bulimia when I was about 23, I realized I had been married for a year. Yeah, about a year. I realized I was planning my suicide again. I thought that that had been left behind, but my food issue, bulimia, had come to such an extent that I felt helpless again. Now, I don't know if at that point, how much of a role my husband at that point played into that, or if I'd been starting to get triggered because of what my stepmom, the control there. I think that probably did. But again, I'm not willing to put blame on a person per se. I have to own my recovery and I have to own what I've done in the past. But because I recognized and realized I need to do something about this. I'm married and I want to have children, and I don't want, I can't be considering suicide. I need to get healthy. So I went to an outpatient program for bulimia. And the interesting thing about bulimia, it's the least detected. Anorexic, you can see because they're getting very, very, very tiny. Overeating, you can see because they're gaining weight. Bulimics are the quietest ones because you're not seeing them throwing up. You're not recognizing that they just went and spent their school lunch hour running, 3 miles around the track in the snow, which is exactly what I would do. I say I was half cured. So I stopped the throwing up. I stopped the over exercising, but I didn't stop the overeating. That's where my struggle is. And that's where I agree so much, Kevin, with what you said. It's a trying to have control over my choices. I had zero control over anything as a child, and my food was restricted unless I had done something good. Then it was a free for all. And that's really hard to rewire in your head. And I'm frustrated, to be honest. I'm frustrated with how many decades it's taken me to rewire that. But I will not give up. I will not. I know that there is victory for me in this. And I know that it's there. I just have to still step through that.
Well, and again, that it's a process and it's ongoing. And, often people want to bring us their story and wrap it up in a nice little box. But the truth is, it's ongoing.
Absolutely.
It is an ongoing struggle. And the fact that you just are willing to talk about it and to be present with it and to look at it is so huge. And for instance, you think about it's been decades, but you're also looking at the silent one. So of course, even though it's been decades, you've been able to cover it up, hide it, mask it, do all the things that you do. And because of that, you are going to be able to help, and probably already have helped so many people.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that you take responsibility for the issues you're having. That's something we really emphasize, something we talk about a lot is, we come from trauma. We have to deal with that trauma. And one of the first steps is acknowledging it and talking about it. But after that comes recognizing our issues and what do we do with about those issues? How do we handle those issues? And it is then our responsibility to handle those issues. And so many people, I think, feel like once they come out and they talk about the trauma and they can put everything on what happened to them, then they don't want to look at, their work that they need to do. They don't want to look at the rest of the work that,
right,
comes from what happened. But that's the healing process, is looking at your issues and understanding them and understanding how to address them.
Yeah, I have found a lot of people too. And I know that at one point it's easy to play the victim, but I no longer claim that I'm a victim. I'm a victor. And yes. I may not have seen victory in all of my situations yet, but I know that it's there and I claim it and I know I'm going to walk through it. It's just a matter of process. But
it's actually not I'm going to, you are. I am walking through it. And I think that again is like getting to the end, and it's like you are victoriously doing this amazing thing. And I just have so much respect for you.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You are really brave. Yeah. And beautiful.
What you're doing. Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Lisa, we always wrap up in prayer. And so would it be okay with you if Kevin started and then I'll go and then you sign us out in prayer?
Absolutely. I love that.
Pastor Lisa.
Pastor Lisa. So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings, and especially the work that Lisa is doing and the work that you are doing in her life and the ones that she is touching. I just thank you that you have blessed her with the courage to share her story and the courage to reach out to others and look for those that need help, look for those that need to hear her story so that they can feel safe. And I just thank you for the safe place she has created for other women to be able to not only tell their story, but to get the healing. And Lord, I just pray you would bless her ministry and that you would walk with her and that others would see your love and your joy in her. And Lord, I just thank you again that she was willing to share on our podcast. And I just pray that she would find the peace in you as she goes through this journey. In your name I pray.
Father, I thank you for her willingness to share her story. I think of the woman listening who has been holding this secret forever and has not felt safe in her own church, Father, that she might find Celebrate Recovery, that she might reach out to Lisa, that she might start to get the help and the healing and the freedom. I love what Lisa said when she finally spoke the words that felt like 15 pounds dropped off of her, Lord, the freedom that comes with being able to share our truth, that it's not shameful, that it's just this thing we carry and we don't have to. You never asked us to carry it. And yet, whatever the self-imposed or people imposed or church imposed, that Lord, I just pray for freedom, that we can begin to tell our story, speak our truth, and get to where we can recognize that it is a desire you created in us and that you want love for us, that's always what you wanted. You wanted us to be in community and relationship. And that's what it seems like the Bible is all about being in community. And so, Father, I pray as Lisa walks forward, you will just guide her steps as she creates this program of discipleship, that you will bring to her the women that need to hear, that need to see what she has to offer, and that need her listening ear. In your Son's holy name.
Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity to be able to share my story. Lord, I ask for a blessing on Lori and Kevin as they continue with this podcast, as they talk to others. And Lord, I just pray for the people, for the men and the women who hear this podcast today, Lord, that they would be able to find something in my story that they can relate with, that you would speak to their heart, and that they would find healing, that they would find hope, and that they would find the strength, your strength, Lord, to be able to start walking through and processing through whatever it is that may be holding them back, that's been standing in their way or standing between you and they, Lord, between their relationship with you, Lord, that they would be able to take something away from this story of mine, that you have just brought so much out of what was ugly, and you're bringing such good out of. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity and for the people that'll be listening. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Lisa. If somebody wants to talk to you, how do they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Lisa Shelby. On Instagram, I am Seattle Babe. My daughter chose that. Seattle Babe 44, I believe. Yeah, just shoot me a message on Messenger, and I would love to have a conversation, get together, have coffee, phone conversation, whatever. So
awesome.
Thank you.